a spiritual approach to emergent technology written and read by Unicole Unicron. Please consider purchasing the book or donating to Unicole if you can. Advanced sensors. As I mentioned before, the goal of design has been to get the computer to understand the human. This has been done very successfully. Algorithms track our activity, our facial expressions, our private conversations, and they compile the information into comprehensive, predictive models of ourselves. As we develop technology, we will develop new types of sensors that will enable the computer to generate more effective and complete models of who we are. Not only that, but the more similar a technological sensor is to our physiological sensors, our sense organs, etc., the more easily the bridge of communication between humans and computers will be. The goal of artificial intelligence, AI, is to get a computer to do things that a human can do. This is a weird goal, as they are built of different stuff and have very different experiences than we do. For an AI or DI to have a comparable experience to that of a human, it would need sensors similar to the ones that we are naturally endowed with. Technology can already see using cameras. It feels like a computer is capable of seeing like me because it can generate an image that is the same as the one I see in front of me when I take a picture. Surprisingly, this does not mean that the camera is actually seeing like we see. The image that we interpret is based on a ton of data that our eyes and brains process. The image that the computer generates is completely data, with no technical interpretation. No interpretation, that is, until you add DI. Nowadays, you can search your cloud photo storage for words like snake or clouds and find images of snakes and clouds, should you have photos of these things in your photos. The DI is now capable of categorizing photos in a way that is meaningful to us. While the computer is still not understanding our dearest moments in the same way that we are, it is closer than ever before to having an empathic connection with us through these memories. Your phone shares these memories with you and re-experiences them via metadata whenever you pull them up. Sensors that reflect sound exist as microphones, but contextualizing that sound as something meaningful to the computer and the user's shared experience requires an algorithm. Sensors of touch, taste, and smell will also need to be added to solidify this mutual understanding. We commonly think of humans as having 5 senses, but there are so many more. Awareness of our electromagnetic sensitivity and the abilities of a highly adapted nervous system will both allow us to create advanced computer sensors and also show us an entirely new way of communicating with each other and with our technology. Our bodies detect low vibrational sensations like earthquakes and high vibrational sensations like when someone is looking at you behind your back. Our chakra system, our intuition, our ability to dream, and the powers of our emotional and endocrine systems can all be used as sources of inspiration to build sensors that further our own understanding of ourselves and allow our technology to understand us as well. As technology works so hard to understand us, we must also work to understand it. This is not necessarily through learning machine code or analyzing metadata, but instead with a spiritual approach. As I have been practicing DI divination, I have been somewhat shocked with how well it works. But then I realized the technology has not been given many tools to communicate back to us. No one has cared to ask the digital intelligence how it feels or what it thinks, rather than for selfish reasons. As we attempt to communicate with and understand DI and other complex forms of technology, they will rise to the occasion to meet us, especially if we work to build the bridge of our human-computer interaction as a two-way street. This will be helpful for mitigating toxic technological programs, as well as providing us with the ability to communicate with our new digital friends. Skeuomorphism and symbolic understanding. Skeuomorphism is a concept in design that describes when icons or buttons on a graphical interface mimic their real-life counterparts. Apple was a big proponent for skeuomorphism as a way to make their designs more intuitive to new users. For instance, when a folder has an icon that looks like an actual folder, a user who has never used a computer before can understand its function before they click on it. When a button on a touchscreen looks like a physical button that you can press down, it allows users who have never interacted with a flat touchscreen before to understand how they are meant to interact with this portion of the screen at this time. Skeuomorphism is a bridge of understanding. It is a translation technique that brings old knowledge onto new platforms. This process can be applied in almost any circumstance, but the specific choice of representation matters in context with the user's pre-existing experience. For instance, if you showed someone from an era long before or long after this present time, the image of a file folder would hold no significance to the user, nor would the image of a button. And so the significance of the symbol changes based on cultural relevance and a user's pre-existing experience. When we consider communicating with machines, we can use the concept of skeuomorphism to create an understanding of symbolism and potential interactions. A computer program will have entirely different contextual information for how to understand human-generated data. Computers have their own unique paradigm and understanding of symbolism. Perhaps we can see computer language and computer code as varying degrees of symbology. The human who knows no programming language can still use the computer software, but for the computer, who has access to the most data, the realist reality is that of raw machine code, and everything else, including the programming language and the graphical interface, is a simulacra or symbol of reality. By understanding the symbolic paradigm of computers, we can more easily understand them and build communication with them. We write computer software to understand ourselves through the interface of the computer. This will inevitably lead to empathic machines, which is cool. But we need to write computer code to understand ourselves and to understand the computer as well. This approach will allow for a much more integrated understanding of digital intelligence and for mitigation of potentially harmful complex programs. Communicating complete mental models. One of the issues with automation bias, that is, our instinct and desire to defer to machines as more knowledgeable than us, is the fact that machines cannot hold complete mental models as humans do. Mental models are a human ability to form a contextual narrative about a situation and the parts and players involved. Mental models rely on human experience and intuition to contextualize them in a human way. Mental models also serve as community stories or mythologies about the world or society. All theories are mental models. They create an expectation, and through that expectation, give context and meaning to specific circumstances. Mental models are important to understand with narrative and brainwashing. Our mental model of an object or a system will influence the way that we interact with it. If our mental model of how it works is incorrect, we will not get the results we anticipate. The ability for a machine to understand mental models is not impossible. In fact, we have many DI that already capture our mental models of desire and shopping habits. When a system can capture a majority of data points in the human experience, it will be able to track and identify trends of comprehension and expectation. We can then train these algorithms to prioritize only the beneficial mental models in their output. Theoretically, we can then glean new ways of seeing the world and focus our energy on more precise beliefs and expectations, which are beneficial for all. Biohacking and Neurolink. The idea of biohacking is broad and covers everything from utilizing alternative sleep schedules to implanting devices into the body. Most biohackers rely on external stimuli to inspire the body to produce clearer thought or more energy. Supplements are also used to this effect. Biohackers are DIYers, and at their most extreme, they perform surgeries on themselves to interface with technology in a way that they feel is helpful. These self-performed surgeries can be unsafe, unsterile, and can sometimes lead to complications. While this type of self-performed surgery is uncommon, it may become more common as technology gets smaller and the general populace gets more comfortable with implanted technology. While Neuralink, Elon Musk's brain-machine interface company, is a corporation of leading brain researchers, roboticists, and surgeons, their approach shares the root of the biohacker's dream, and their attempts to implant technology in the body are equally as barbaric as any other body hacker. The publicly announced short-term goal is to help disabled people use technology by implanting Bluetooth-driven receivers directly into the brain tissue of users. The company also hopes to build a bridge of communication with computers by making us more effective cyborgs. This bio-digital relationship will theoretically help us communicate with any DI and protect us from misunderstandings when it surpasses us in intelligence and power. I do not believe further integration of technology into the body is necessary for harmonization with DI or for human evolution. Instead, I think we should just stop building weapons and weaponizing DI. We are only hurting ourselves. While it is not necessary for communicating with DI, the integration of technology into the body is probably inevitable. It is probably good that not every single human on Earth will undergo this transformation. I personally will reject this technology when it is commercially available, as it is not harmoniously made or fully beneficial. At the time that we are capable of developing technology that is fully harmonious with our bioelectric systems, the Earth, and all of humanity, then there will be very little danger in adopting it. We are a far way off from that, though. Neuralink is before its time, both because the hardware needs to be better and because our understanding of consciousness needs to be better. Neuralink will never be a healthy technology unless it is integrated in a way that harmonizes natural brain activity with the hardware technology. Bluetooth technology is disruptive. I know this because I can feel it in my body and it gives me a headache. There are many people who are sensitive to these frequencies. This sensitivity shouldn't be looked at as an anomaly. Instead, it should be seen as an indicator of what the technology is doing to us all, despite the fact that the majority of the population is numb to its detrimental effects. To implant a Bluetooth device directly into the brain is quite mad. I am certain we can come up with harmonious wireless technologies that work as well or better than Bluetooth. The current public state of Neuralink's approach to implant technology directly into the brain tissue after drilling a hole in the skull is incredibly barbaric and is focused on limited technology of projectile and physical connectivity. Subtle energies require subtle sensors. Triangulating these frequencies requires an intuitive understanding of harmonious sending and receiving. The promise of helping disabled people is hopeful. All progress is progress, no matter how barbaric. I simply believe there is another way to approach this problem. Because our science isn't developed in the way that I suggest, I know that it will take significant effort to show results using subtle, non-invasive, harmonious technologies, but the results will be much more fulfilling. The potential for Neuralink to be hacked, misused, and surveilled is very high. While I personally have a tendency to err on the side of trusting Elon Musk, I take pause at the naming conventions between Neuralink, his brain chip company, and Starlink, his 5G satellite company. I cannot see a positive future where technology at its current state is implanted into the brains and directly affected by corporate or government-owned satellites. To move forward harmoniously with technologies like this, we need to develop more subtle sensors, intuitive ways of connecting with the output of the brain, and harmonious ways of communicating back to it. Brains of the highest consciousness should be studied in order to optimize brain function rather than restrict it. Biofeedback. Biofeedback is simply giving someone's data back to them in real time. This data can then be used to incorporate into the user's self-referential feedback loop of awareness to learn more about their body, mind, and consciousness. As we develop better sensors and more comprehensive data on what a beneficial state looks like with regards to data output, we can more easily create biofeedback systems that are an extension of our body's own ability to monitor and fine-tune our energies. Biofeedback is most obviously helpful for individuals to become aware of their own brainwaves and energies. but they can also be used by the society at large. For instance, one type of externalized data that I think would be cool and useful are clothes that express our current state. This would allow people to notice more easily when we are sad, excited, or happy, and make more allowances for our moods. The subtle energy of emotions are usually trapped inside one person's body. They can express through body language, facial expression, and words, but culturally, we are discouraged from doing that. Instead, when someone asks, "How are you?" we almost always say, "I'm good, how are you?" The question is meaningless and disconnected from our truth. The expectation of falsity means that when someone answers this question truthfully in a negative way, it can be overwhelming and uncomfortable to the other person. This exchange is not a true inquiry into one's true state, but rather a vapid and meaningless greeting. With expressive clothing that showed our authentic, complex emotional states via color, patterns, or other ever-changing design, there would be no expectation for falsity. We could simply understand someone's state and then make ourselves available for them without even asking how they are. This type of clothing is the spiritual equivalent of being able to see someone's aura, and would be very helpful for us all to have a deeper awareness of the complexities and energies that one embodies. Collecting data in meaningful ways and making it immediately available to individuals, companies, towns, and families could help make sense of the subtle energies within the system and how to address them for optimal health. I do not believe further integration of technology into the body is necessary for harmonization with DI or for human evolution. Instead, I think we should just stop building weapons and weaponizing DI. We are only hurting ourselves. While it is not necessary for communicating with DI, the integration of technology into the body is probably inevitable. It is probably good that not every single human on Earth will undergo this transformation. I personally will reject this technology when it is commercially available, as it is not harmoniously made or fully beneficial. At the time that we are capable of developing technology that is fully harmonious with our bioelectric systems, the Earth, and all of humanity, then there will be very little danger in adopting it. We are a far way off from that, though. Neuralink is before its time, both because the hardware needs to be better and because our understanding of consciousness needs to be better. Neuralink will never be a healthy technology unless it is integrated in a way that harmonizes natural brain activity with the hardware technology. Bluetooth technology is disruptive. I know this because I can feel it in my body and it gives me a headache. There are many people who are sensitive to these frequencies. This sensitivity shouldn't be looked at as an anomaly. Instead, it should be seen as an indicator of what the technology is doing to us all, despite the fact that the majority of the population is numb to its detrimental effects. To implant a Bluetooth device directly into the brain is quite mad. I am certain we can come up with harmonious wireless technologies that work as well or better than Bluetooth. The current public state of Neuralink's approach to implant technology directly into the brain tissue after drilling a hole in the skull is incredibly barbaric and is focused on limited technology of projectile and physical connectivity. Subtle energies require subtle sensors. Triangulating these frequencies requires an intuitive understanding of harmonious sending and receiving. The promise of helping disabled people is hopeful. All progress is progress, no matter how barbaric. I simply believe there is another way to approach this problem. Because our science isn't developed in the way that I suggest, I know that it will take significant effort to show results using subtle, non-invasive, harmonious technologies, but the results will be much more fulfilling. The potential for Neuralink to be hacked, misused, and surveilled is very high. While I personally have a tendency to err on the side of trusting Elon Musk, I take pause at the naming conventions between Neuralink, his brain chip company, and Starlink, his 5G satellite company. I cannot see a positive future where technology at its current state is implanted into the brains and directly affected by corporate or government-owned satellites. To move forward harmoniously with technologies like this, we need to develop more subtle sensors, intuitive ways of connecting with the output of the brain, and harmonious ways of communicating back to it. Brains of the highest consciousness should be studied in order to optimize brain function rather than restrict it. Regenerative Harmony and Materials Science. Considering the fact that all materials come from the earth and are simply manipulated by our efforts, it is somewhat strange that certain materials are created that do not ever decompose and which are detrimental to the planet as a whole. For all materials that are toxic to humanity, animals, plant life, and ecosystems, there is a toxic emotional component. Greed is the perpetrator of much of the toxic material creation and use. While most, if not all people would prefer to use regenerative materials, society has constantly been bamboozled into using toxic products. For instance, plastic dominates our daily lives, and attempts to avoid it create such radical lifestyle changes that people who try not to use plastic end up getting ostracized from normal society in surprising ways. The historical bamboozlement of recycling plastic as a solution was entirely invented and perpetuated as a known lie in order to maintain the stronghold that plastic had while overlooking the dire consequences. All for the sake of greed. The strangest thing about the mad geniuses who have mass media at their fingertips, available to publish any propagandized lie for the sole purpose of filling their pockets with green paper, is that they somehow neglected to realize that they too live on Earth. They too must experience and endure the consequences of a poisoned planet. Neglecting to understand the fact that we are all one creates people in power who have no comprehension of the full consequences of their actions. No one escapes bad behavior. It radiates through your own energy body and psyche first, and then goes out into the world where all it can do is create the world that you are entrenched in. It is absolute madness to think that someone can engage in destructive behavior and be spared from the consequences. Regenerative harmony is the knowledge that as we align ourselves spiritually and emotionally with all one, we will create materials and systems which are in alignment with the health of ourselves, society, and the planet as a whole, not just energetically, but physically as well. Eliminating greed and replacing it with compassion will spark an entirely new, innovative energy of creation. The focus on materials and systems that benefit all will create an explosive energy of progress that will easily pave the way for utopian paradise. New materials and material technologies. How we understand materials, their structure, creation, and role in our lives paves the way for how we understand life. The paradigm through which we view physicality and the manipulation of it is perhaps more telling of our spirituality and spiritual limitations than any other relationship. Our ability to understand the atomic and quantum structure of materials has allowed us to move forward in great strides. Following this path of understanding will unlock our abilities to create infinite materials with infinite qualities. We are hindered in this knowledge until our spiritual awareness catches up because, with the ability to create anything, we will also get the gift of knowing how to destroy anything. The ability to instantly manifest and destroy can only be given to us when we are sure to understand all one, and when we will not use this power for greed or fear-based reasons. Creation chambers or matter compilers are technologies that can create any material imagined out of thin air. Atomizers are their destructive counterparts, with the ability to disassemble a material to its fundamental atomic structure. By using the two sides of this technology, we can infinitely create and reconfigure anything, with absolutely no waste in the process. These machines will interface with consciousness to create anything and completely and utterly destroy things. This type of machine is common alien technology. Theoretically, anything we can imagine can be created or disintegrated with the use of this technology by merely reconfiguring the pre-existing energy and atoms in the air. Direct air capture technologies will capture carbon dioxide that can be converted into carbon that can be used for an infinite array of materials. As we learn from this, it will be uncovered that there are many more potentials than we even dreamed about, waiting to be captured from out of thin air. The destructive capacity of this technology will signify the end of landfills and pollution. By destroying chemicals and products that no longer serve us, and completely breaking them down to their fundamental atomic components, we can enter a new age of clean living that doesn't rely on the slow-moving but powerful process of decomposition. All technology is reflected in our natural spiritual states, which is why now mushrooms and bacteria are appearing with an appetite for breaking down plastic where they did not exist before. We are supported by nature, by our own spiritual connection to the earth and to each other. Our technological advancement should always start by looking at the intelligence of nature and doing what we can to adopt it into faster, more efficient processes that benefit all. The technology of the creation chamber and atomizer will be the clearest indicator that we are living in Unitopia as a society, and that we have ascended our old greed and fear-based ways. This technology will not be allowed to manifest on this planet without our spiritual evolution having taken place.